enter. And again, this is gonna be relatively high level, okay? In event management, how many of you have ever planned an event? Any kind of an event,
Even just for home or?
even just for home, just for personal purposes. Okay, what kind of event did you plan?
I plan to get together with my friends and
Okay, awesome,
Mhm.
cool. Michael?
Oh, just Easter, having the family over.
Okay, so cool. Anybody else plan any kind of other events or get-togethers or things like that? Okay, you've planned something. Chances are you've taken some of these steps, but now we're gonna think about it in more of like a big overview. Okay, a higher level, a higher, bigger perspective. It takes organization. What was the first thing that you had to do when you thought you were gonna plan an event?
Get information
What kind of information do you have to gather?
and guests.
Okay,
Yeah, and then how much food do we have to get for the guests?
cool. So how many people there's gonna be, what the food's gonna be like,
Location.
the location of what that's going to be, good. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
And then I have to check with them to see if they're available and
Yeah.
then give them dates. Like,
You have to plan the date. We have to send out invitations, all those things. It takes organization in order to run an event successfully. Okay. So we're going to talk about things that we'll think about organizing. Okay. In the hotel, we want to figure out what is the structure of our sales office. Okay. If we think about that organizational chart, that's not what I wanted. Hold on. If we think about the organizational chart, let me see what color is going to work best. Obviously, we have the general manager at the very top of our organizational chart, right? And then we have the AGM at the next level. And then we have all the different department levels. We have rooms division, which has front desk and housekeeping. We have engineering, which has all the maintenance. Then we have sales and marketing, okay? And we talked a little bit about how sales and marketing work together. Remember, marketing makes the plan and sales executes the plan. So what does our sales office structure look like? Who's in charge of what? Okay. When things come in, when someone makes a call to come in, we need to know which group do we send, which person do we send that to? So that way that person gets the best attention. Okay. With the structures of the sales, we also want to loop in our revenue manager. Because our revenue manager is the one who's going to tell us, can we take this group or can we not? Okay, what rate can we offer? In small properties, we might have one person. Okay, so we might have a director of sales, we might have an office of two people. In larger properties, the jobs tend to be a little bit more specialized. Okay, so somebody's going to be in charge of corporate groups that are more than 200 rooms on peak. Okay, when I say 200 rooms on peak, what do you think that means?
max?
So it is 200 max. When I say on peak, what do you think that means?
At your hotel's highest occupancy, like that's projected.
Close. It's not necessarily about the hotel, it's about the group. Okay, so if my group is coming in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, okay, they're coming in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, they have 100 rooms reserved. Tuesday, they have 250 rooms reserved. And then on Wednesday, maybe they have 200 rooms targeted, right? This is 250 on peak. What is the peak night of their group? Okay, so if this is 250 on peak, then that's going to go to a specific person. Or if it's 100 and less on peak, then that's going to go to a certain person. That way, that person knows I'm working with 100 room nights on peak or less. You work with the revenue manager a little bit differently. You work with the sales team a little bit differently. Maybe that group that has 100 or less on peak maybe doesn't have as big of a need for meeting room space as someone who has 250 or 500 on peak, right? They may need more meeting space in order to accommodate. So knowing in larger properties, oftentimes you have a specific niche, you have a specific market that you're working with, specific type of clientele. We also have, we talked about last class, right? Our Smurf group. So we also have, there's usually someone who is in charge of Smurf. We also have groups that are, well, social is part of Smurf, right? So social would be things like weddings, anniversary parties, things that are more social in nature, okay? You may have Smurf even broken out. So I have someone who's just in charge of taking care of the weddings because what's needed for a wedding is very different than what's needed for a military group. Right, so those salespeople have that very specialized. Now you may be in charge of 3 of these things, right? But when you're dealing with a social event, okay? Who was it? Was it THLA? We went to short course. I think what is it? I think was it Scott Joslov that did the legal part, right? Um, and he talked about how somebody planned grandpa's 100th birthday. And then unfortunately grandpa didn't make it to his 100th birthday.
Oh,
And they
no.
wanted to cancel the event, but they couldn't cancel the event because the contract said you can't cancel. That's not a cancelable thing without incurring a penalty. And so that salesperson took it upon themselves to say, okay, grandpa didn't make it to his 100th birthday, but how about we make it his celebration of life? You're already paying for it. So how about you make it a big party about grandpa and make it a celebration of life?
That's what I would have done.
Yeah, and so it's like, as a salesperson, how can I get my client to shift their thinking, without looking like a jerk and an insensitive person, right? You still have to pay me. I'm sorry. I'd rather you pay me and get a party out of it than pay me and get nothing out of it, right? Because if you cancel too close to the date, there's not a refund policy. Okay. So here we go. Director of Sales and Marketing is over both of those departments, and then you've got the Director of Sales. Um, and that Director of Sales is in charge of the sales managers, the convention services manager. That's basically what happens is the sales books and the convention cooks. Okay. I don't know why we like to have rhyming stuff, but sometimes you'll hear some salespeople be like, I book it, you cook it. Meaning I book it, I make the business, and I'm gonna give it all to you and your services, so you're gonna service the event. I book it, you cook it. I don't want to cook anything. I just want to go out and sell, 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 sell. And then you make it happen, right? Sometimes we say, I sell the dream, you service the nightmare. Okay. So I sell the dream. This is what you can do. Now you make everything that I told them happen. Okay. And so your sales and services team need to work very closely together. You don't want your sales team to promise chicken on a filet mignon budget. Sorry, flip that. You don't want them to promise filet mignon on a chicken budget. Somebody comes in and is like, hey, my budget is $45 per person. Okay, great. We're not going to be serving steak. Okay. We may not be serving chicken at the $45 budget in a hotel. So we always want to make sure that the sales does not overpromise something that we cannot deliver on. Okay. Um, so we all need to work really closely together. Where do you think revenue management's job, what do you think their part is in this big picture of sales and events? Because remember, in revenue management, we talked about selling what? The right room, the right guest on the right day for the right price. Well, what does revenue management's job have to do with the event that's going to be happening in our ballroom?
I would say they would need to make sure that that the event, that the hotel, that their job would, I can't describe it.
I
Okay,
think their job is, they're the ones that come up with the price of the room rate for this specific group.
yeah, so the sales teams comes in and they're like, okay, I've got this group that has 400, 200 rooms. Okay, what rate can I give them? And the revenue manager is going to come back and say, you know what, right now we only have allocated, what did I say, 400, 200, 400 rooms?
200.
200 rooms, right? Revenue management may come back and say, hey, we only have 300 rooms allocated and we already have a group of 200 in-house. So I don't know if I can handle this additional 200 rooms for groups events. But if they're interested in looking at a different date, okay, or vice versa, does revenue management say, yeah, you know what? Okay, great. They're asking for a 125 rate. Our rate is normally $200 for that night. And they're asking for a 125 rate. So we can honor a 125 rate, but they need to spend $40,000 in food and beverage. So that banquet that they host, the breakfast that they have, the snack break that they have during their meeting, all of that needs to come up to $40,000 in order for me to honor a 125 rate. Okay, so revenue management is going to be looking at the total revenue, the total spend of the group as well, not just, and we'll talk about it in revenue management, we'll talk about it in chapter 7. That's the displacement analysis. We'll talk about how the total spend comes into play, and that's how we can offer lower rates because they're going to spend their money. Now, the attendees might be buying their own hotel rooms, but the group that's there is going to spend the money in food and beverage. What just happened? All right. So sales and marketing, of course, we have our director of sales and marketing. They're the ones who monitors those action plans we talked about last time, the marketing sets up, and then how is sales doing that? Director of sales is the one who coordinates with their staff to tell them, this is what you need to be working on, or hey, David, what did you do last week to work towards this goal? Here's your goal for the week. Here's your initiative. What did you do? What actions did you take? And let's follow up with that, okay? The sales manager obviously is the one who sells. The services manager services it, okay? Yes, sir.
So on a smaller property, I know they sometimes, they don't have the revenue manager, but I've seen them have what they call the operations manager. Would he do any of those?
So operations manager is sometimes, the operations manager today is kind of like what the AGM or the rooms division manager. So the rooms division manager typically oversees the front desk and the housekeeping. So I've seen in a lot of hotels we visited, their operations manager is the rooms division manager rather than calling it, because that's front desk and housekeeping is a lot of your operations. So that might be like the AGM level, it might be right below the AGM. So GM, AGM, director of or sorry, instead of director of rooms, director of operations.
Okay.
Yeah. But you might check to see, like sometimes when I was at La Quinta, the general manager and the sales manager were the revenue manager. They're the ones who set the rates. They're the ones who monitored that. They didn't necessarily have a revenue manager on site. So in smaller properties, it may be sales and the general manager that work together to monitor that. Yeah, so it kind of just depends. Do you guys have a revenue manager at the Courtyard? No?
It's just Dusty.
Okay,
So we have Dusty and then our AGM. And then we have an open ops supervisor and we have no front desk supervisor right now either.
okay, awesome. Cool.
We don't, yeah, we don't have no revenue. We got
You have sales. Sarah's in sales, right? Sarah and Michelle.
And then we have Elizabeth, which is HR and accounting.
Yeah, so oftentimes in smaller properties, people play dual roles. Of course. Yep. Okay. Tour and travel sales managers. This is one who, again, in a larger property might be a more specific role of working with tour operators, right? Somebody who's going to come and they're gonna show up on a big charter bus. Okay. So there may be people that work specifically with that market or that type of guest and visitor. Okay. Um, all right. Regional. So you go from the hotel, which is the property, and then take one step back, and then you have regional. So you might have someone who is in charge of maybe, you're gonna see this a lot in property management companies. Or you're gonna see this in companies that own multiple hotels. Okay, or corporations like Marriott. If they own multiple hotels within an area, you're gonna have that. Now, not every Marriott is owned by Marriott. We have franchises, right? And so with those franchises, typically you've got property management companies. You have things like White Lodging. That's one. White Lodging in San Antonio operates many properties, including the Kimpton that just opened. I believe they also own and operate the Plaza Hotel on the corner of Alamo and Cesar Chavez. Okay, so Plaza, I believe, is a Marriott property. I think it's a Tribute. I can't remember, but the Plaza is a Marriott property, and the Kimpton is IHG, Intercontinental Hotel Group, which is the same group as like Holiday Inn. Okay, so the White Lodging has both brands, Marriott and IHG. So they oftentimes property management companies will manage brands, multiple brands within their portfolio. So if you want to get that kind of experience of some of them fixate just on one particular brand because they know those brand standards. Some of them like to diversify. Okay, White Lodging, Phoenix Hospitality is another property management company, and I know they're nationwide. I'm pretty sure they would be global, but I know they're definitely nationwide. Phoenix Hospitality Group, and how you can tell PHG is Phoenix Hospitality Group. How you can tell is if their email address is something something at phg.com, at Phoenix Hospitality Group, or at White Lodging. Even though you're emailing somebody at a Marriott, if it's at whitelodging.com, then they're working for White Lodging. The benefit sometimes by working for a property management company, especially at the corporate level, so higher outside of the property. My friend Tamara used to work for Baywood Hotels, and Baywood owns and operates quite a few hotels in San Antonio. And the benefit was that she got the perks of being a Marriott employee as well as a Hilton employee because they managed multiple brands. Presidian Hospitality, that's where the Estancia Hotel and the Doubletree by the airport that we visited in front office management class. Okay, they own and operate multiple. No, I don't think they own. They own a few hotels, but they mostly operate, right? So the owner owns the hotel, but they don't know how to run a hotel. So they hire a company like PHG, White Lodging, Presidian to come in and operate their hotel for them. Okay. So with that, all of that to say is sometimes a sales manager may be over multiple properties. And so the benefit of that is, okay, if this property is not available on this day, well, why don't you consider this hotel we have over here? And work with that small group, that regional group, to figure out how we can meet the goals of the property overall.
Oh, Mr. Minsky,
Yes.
I made my count. I made my count.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. SOPs, standard operating procedures. SOPs. That is an acronym that you will hear quite a lot in business in general. SOPs. What is the SOP? Okay. What is my standard operating procedures? So what is the SOP when somebody calls and they're requesting information about a group that is less than 200 rooms on peak. What's my standard operating procedure? I'm going to direct that. If I'm an administrative assistant in the sales office, I'm going to direct that to the correct salesperson. Okay. That administrative position is a great position to get into in a sales office, to get your feet wet into sales, to figure out that's what you really want, because you're going to be funneling and filtering all those calls and sending them to where they need to. Administrative assistant is basically a polite way of saying secretary. Okay. It's a better way than, because nobody wants to be a secretary. But an administrative assistant, that sounds very important. Okay. But so an administrative assistant is someone who basically is answering the phones. But they also maybe are doing paperwork, maybe they're reviewing contracts, maybe they're whatever, they're filtering emails and sending them out whoever they need to go to. Okay. So things that are covered by our SOPs. We have our function book. Okay. That function book, let's see what time it is. I've got 30 minutes. Okay. That function book is essentially, think about like a book that like a day planner has all the days for the year. That function book has all the events that are coming up in our, whether it's a lead, meaning there's no contract signed. They're just, someone called in, they want some information, we sent them some information, and now we have to follow up with them to say, do you want to book with us? Okay. But that function book has all that information in there. The guest room book tells us how many guest rooms are being utilized. Okay. What is the policy? Okay. You should never, ever, ever book an event without a signed contract. Okay. Signed contracts is what books you into the system and makes you for sure happening. Because until you have that signed contract, there's no agreement about how much you're going to pay and how much I'm going to provide. Okay. And so what are the policies? Do we have a deposit at the beginning, and how much is that deposit? How many days without, like close to the event, do we have request full payment? All those different policies need to be covered by our SOPs. Okay. The other thing that we want to talk about, and this is something that is helpful, is if we have some kind of a guideline. And when we have, like, so for example, right now, January usually typically is relatively slow for hotels. Holidays are just ending. People aren't having big groups yet. People aren't having conventions quite yet. And so if we have low demand periods, what does that rate look like? What can we offer? Okay. High demand periods. So I'm not sure. I need to reach out to Michelle because Paris is coming, and we usually send the Paris kids to the Fairfield Spring Hill. I think usually Spring Hill side. And they're coming in March. So no, in April. They're coming in April, first part of April, because the France is going to be here when we have our event on April 3rd. I just found that out. But so I need to make sure I reach out to her to make sure we have those rooms and the dates. But I say that because we just also started working with a group out of Italy for a similar type situation to bring students from Italy to St. Philip's. Same type of program as our French exchange, but they're coming at the end of April, first part of May, which is Fiesta. So when I call Michelle and say, hey, what rate can you offer me in April, the first part of April for the French group, the rate that she's going to quote me for the end of April is probably going to be very different. Right. And so trying to get our college to think about that, right? Somebody who's not in the event world isn't thinking about that. They're not thinking about what else is happening in the city and how that's going to affect my rate. They're going to be like, well, you gave me a rate of 109 in April. So end of April, I want a 109 rate too. Doesn't work like that. Okay. So what can we offer in high and low demand periods? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna use an example of, okay, so back, my favorite place is Galveston. So we would go there in the summer, and of course, like for my dad's water convention, it's really, really expensive during the summer. And it used to be cheaper in the winter. And then Galveston started having cruise lines.
Yep.
And we noticed that from my first cruise with my whole family was in like December of 2007, and then it went on to 2008. Was much cheaper back then. But as the demand and the peak of these cruise ships have gotten so much more, and now that's one of the ideal places in Texas to go for this to take off. They now charge hotels like
Yeah,
almost an arm and a leg now, just to be able to go.
yeah, especially if you know
Yeah.
that if they know when the cruises are departing, then they'll know that schedule, that calendar, and they'll know on this date people might be coming in the night before to go on a cruise.
Mhm.
So that rate's going to be a little bit different because we might have a higher demand. Remember, rooms are rate based on demand. So if we have a high demand and a low supply, we're going to offer our rooms at a premium rate. Trying to sell the right room to the right guest on the right day for the right time. So yeah, absolutely. That definitely plays a role in how things evolve. That's a great example.
We were trying to find hotels. I mean, it just was so expensive and we could not get anybody to go down and I don't understand this. And they were like, well, it's cruise season, so
Yep.
we're gonna
Absolutely. So
do
now
higher prices.
now you can go and you can tell your family like this is the reason why this is happening. And then you get a job in a hotel, and then that way, if you get a job in a hotel, then you maybe use your associate rate on that day that you go beforehand, and then your family benefits.
Nice.
So other things we want to talk about when it comes to SOPs, VIPs and complimentary rooms. Okay. So in a contract, oftentimes you're gonna see something that says your comp rate policy is 1 for every 50. Okay. Meaning you're gonna get one comp night for every 50 room nights that you book. So if we go back to that example, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have 100, 250, and 200. Okay. So we add all those together, we get 450, 550. So basically, with this situation, I would get 11 comp nights,
Wow.
right? Because I'm gonna guarantee 550 rooms. So how do we use those 11 comp nights? Well, typically it's the meeting planner. Maybe if you have a VIP, like the president of the company is gonna get that comp night. So that way the company is not necessarily paying for that room, for that VIP to come, or if you have a guest speaker for the conference, then you'll get that based on the room nights that you book. Okay, so the comps be anywhere from 1 to 40, 1 to 50. Okay, it's usually a 1 to some other number, and that's negotiable. When people put in what we call an RFP, which is a request for proposal, they may say, I want my comp rate to be 1 for every 30. And you can be like, you are crazy. Okay. I can do one, and of course, they're gonna try to get the best deal for them. And you as a salesperson have to figure out how can we get the best deal for them, but also take care of the hotel. So no, I can't offer you a 1 to 30 rate, but I can offer you a 1 to 50. Okay, and so knowing what your policies are for VIPs and complimentary rooms is also really helpful.
So,
Yeah.
so you're like, the event that we went to. So Rebecca and them probably got their room comp because
Oh, you mean Jessica and Debbie?
Jessica, yes,
Yeah.
Jessica and Debbie.
Jessica and Debbie, if THLA filled their room block, whatever their room obligation is, if they filled that room block, or whatever they filled, now they stayed, Debbie and Jessica obviously stayed the same night as us. I think we stayed 5 nights, right? So they may not have gotten every night paid for, but they maybe got some nights paid for, which also helps in the budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Meeting room and banquet rooms, those are also part of the SOPs. Oftentimes, if I give you a $40,000 food and beverage minimum, if you meet that minimum, then I'm not gonna charge you for your meeting space. I'm not gonna charge you a room rental. But if you only spend 30,000, but my minimum's 40,000. If you only spend 30,000, I'm gonna take that extra 10 and account it towards your room rental. Okay? So that's why, like, when we talk about food and beverage minimums, whenever I go to a conferences, I'm like, we might as well spend the money, because if the minimum's 30,000 and we only spend 25,000, we might as well spend an extra 5, because we're gonna spend it anyways. We might as well get some food out of it, right? So understanding what all these things are, and one of the other biggest things is our organizational chart. Who reports to who? Okay? Side by side, those are people that are working on the same level. Those are coworkers. And then up and down is our leadership. So who do I report to? Okay? If I'm a salesperson, I'm not going to go directly to the director of sales. I'm going to go to the sales manager first. And then if they can't help me, then I might go to the director of sales. I'm not gonna go, if I'm a salesperson, I'm not gonna go straight to the GM and say, hey, this is what's happening. No, I'm gonna go follow the chain of command. Who is the next person that I need to talk to? Okay? Because when you jump that chain of command, a couple of things happen. This person up here at the top, they're not necessarily focused on the issues that's happening right here, right? Everyone in between is designed to help with those issues until if you go level by level by level and you're still not getting any help, then yeah, eventually it's going to get to that person. But by jumping to that person, it cancels out everyone in between their opportunity to help. So then that person at the top, the GM's like, hey, you have a sales manager. Why isn't the sales manager handling this? Well, because the sales manager didn't know about it, right? And so it's really important to understand what that organizational chart looks like and who reports to who. Okay. Different meetings that we have. Obviously, weekly is going to be weekly meetings are going to happen to figure out what's going to be going on for that particular week or maybe the next week in advance. We want to know what functions are happening. The revenue manager meets regularly with the sales to make sure that we're on track. Okay. There is a concept called pace of build. Who knows who thinks they know what pace of build might mean? Who might have a guess? What is the word pace? When you think about the word pace, and don't think picante, what do you think about?
Pacing
York
yourself, you going to
City.
certain.
Yeah, New York
New
City.
York City.
Really?
Yeah,
Not
you
going too
pace
fast.
yourself, right? Yeah,
I'm saying
you're
safe.
pacing yourself. When I used to run marathons and that pace, that person was like the 2 hour pace, and I'm like, oh, okay, go ahead. And then the 2.5 hour pace passes me, and I'm like, okay, I know where I am. I'm behind 2.5 hours. But that pace helps you know if you're on track, on schedule, right? So pace of build, when we're looking at that from the revenue manager's perspective, okay, hey, sales team, I gave you 500 rooms in the month of March to sell for groups, and you're only at 300 rooms. So your pace of build is a little off, okay? Or I gave you 600 rooms in April and you've sold 750, okay? Stop selling April and let's focus on months that we need to get that. So that pace of build, that revenue manager is going to update the sales team what that pace looks like. How are we on target? Now, if November is not very busy, right? If we're not close to our target in November, is that as much of an issue as, let's say, March? Not really, because November is still 9 months away. March is next month, right? So I may need to stop what I'm trying to do and focus on March to get those numbers up, okay? So that pace of build just gives you a snapshot of how many room nights were allocated, how many room nights did revenue manager give us for sales, and how close are we to meeting that target, What's that?
Now, is that something similar to what we see with Disney, where they're saying you can get these rooms on these particular days at this rate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What they're trying to do is they're trying to fill those rooms at a lower rate because they have lower occupancy. Yeah, maybe they're not on target yet, but they want to get to that level. And so yeah, they may run promotions like that.
Okay, so that
So
would,
I may call a client if I've got a client that's on the books for March, that's just penciled in, right? They haven't signed a contract. I may call them and I'm like, hey, you know what? We're getting close to March. Have you made a decision? If you haven't, I would love to give you a snack break as part of your meeting, right? So I'm going to give you that credit of a snack break to entice you, to encourage you to come and book with me. And so we'll give you a complimentary coffee break. That coffee break doesn't cost us very much. So if it means the difference of booking rooms and not booking rooms, right? The rooms is what's going to give us that revenue. So if I have to give you a free coffee break to book your meeting with me, great. So those types of things we can look at to see what's on the books, what's tentative, and how can we close that sale. And that's what your job is as a salesperson, is you look at what you've got so far, what's in the books, what's not planned, what's not solidified, and how do we make that happen? And also go after new business as well. Okay. Let's look at the importance of relationships. Okay. I would not be where I am today without the relationships that I have built and fostered. Okay. So I encourage you. Sometimes it's hard to get out of your shell if you don't like to talk to people, if you don't like to go and try new things, if you don't like to put yourself kind of, I don't want to say uncomfortable situations in the sense that I feel uncomfortable sometimes when I go into a room and I don't know anybody. Okay. And I've been in the industry for a long time now, right? And if I walk into a room and it's a new type of group that I don't know anybody, I'm not as outgoing as you probably see me like at an AHA luncheon, for example. So I think we all kind of go through that, but you have to put yourselves in those situations because it allows you to come out of your shell a little bit. It allows you to grow a little bit. It allows you to foster those relationships. Okay. And in our industry, we cannot be a taker. We have to be a giver and a taker. Okay. It's okay to take. But you can't be a taker all the time. Okay. Especially in those relationships. So you'll see this as you go through your career. If you want to get into sales, you're going to see that meeting planner who's just in it for the free trip. They're going to say, I'm going to come check out your hotel for a potential event. And they're going to come in and of course, you're going to give them a comp room because they're going to come see your hotel. And of course, you may comp their food while they're eating in your restaurants so they can taste what their guests could experience. Of course, you might wine and dine them while they're there because you want their business. But if they come in time and time and time again and never book business with you, you're going to see those people that are always takers, just going to take. You have to give it's a give and take relationship. Okay. So it's important that you're active. It's important that you develop those relationships. And it's not always about what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? Okay. Now, on that flip side, you can't always be a giver either. Okay. If you're always the giver and people aren't reciprocating, then that's not a good relationship. So you have to kind of find that balance. Okay. So it's really important to have those relationships, have that constant communication, whether it's through email. You want to still personalize it. So I'm going to talk about when we do our discussion over lunch about the sponsorships. When you send out sponsorships, it's important if you know that person to put their name on it, personalize that letter, because that level of personalization tells that person that you took some time in order to create that, rather than just sending out a blanket, hey, here's this to everybody, okay? To actually take time to send it out to somebody personalized, that goes a long way. So technology helps us in being quick about things, but it also potentially can take away a little bit of that personalization. Okay. Um, so excuse me. The account file is something that is basically the MasterCard has everything on it. Okay. The account file is going to be something that is going to include specific information about one particular account. The tickler file is maybe what we call a lead file. So lead generation. So leads, this is like people maybe who they've called in, or hey, I saw this person over here, or Danielle sent me information about somebody for a group. That's my tickler file. That's things to remind me, hey, follow up with these people. Working files are things that I'm actually working on right now. It's not just a lead, it goes beyond a lead. It's somebody that I've actually worked with that person, okay? These forms, these are really important. Tentative booking is, again, it's a form that I fill out of somebody who is thinking about booking with us. The definite means we have a contract signed. That's the main difference between tentative and definite, is our contracts are signed, okay? Change, anytime a change is made, it has to be documented. Who made the change? What change was made? So then that way, at the end, when they come back and they say, Leah, I thought we were having filet mignon for dinner tonight. And then you go back to your file and like, oh no, look, on this day, I have this form with your signature that said we're gonna go ahead and move forward with chicken. Okay, so that change form is really important. Cancellation and lost business. What do you think the difference between cancellation and lost business is? Yeah, Leah.
So like cancellation would be like if somebody cancels,
Uh-huh.
somebody cancels the event or something like that, and then lost business is like let's say they don't show up.
Sort of, you're halfway there. So yes, cancellation means they were booked with us and they canceled. Lost business is they were never booked with us. Okay.
Oh,
We just lost the business. I call, hey Ruth, I just wanted to call to double check to see I have a hold in our books for March 5th through the 10th. Are you still interested in having this event? No, I'm so sorry, I'm not. Why? Because your salesperson was really pushy and they were not listening to anything. No, I'm just kidding. But that lost business form, oftentimes is going to ask for a reason why. Why did we lose your business? If you don't mind me asking, okay? Because that is important when we develop our sales and our marketing plan for the next year, is to look at those lost business forms. Okay, we lost your business because your pool was outdated, or your pool was not renovated, kind of run down. Or and maybe we were a school group and the kids want the pool, right? So that's important to them. If we're a hotel that focuses primarily on business travels, maybe business travelers aren't hanging out by the pool, so it's not a huge focus for us, right? Or maybe the rooms don't have a big enough desk. And so if I've got a corporate group and they need to go back to their rooms at night and work, if we have just a standard room without a big desk and it's just, there's no suite, there's no like extra space, well, we lost because we're not a suite hotel, right? So understanding that lost business is really, really important, okay? We went over each one of those. Yield and revenue management we've talked about. There we go. Any questions about the organization of a sales office? How many of y'all sat with Andy how many of y'all went to Doubletree? When we went, did you go to Doubletree when we went for front office?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and you sat with Andy Herod,
Oh,
the
yeah.
sales manager?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Big, tall, bald guy, really goofy. He's really awesome. He's a great
He
guy.
is very friendly.
You can see why he's in sales. And then at the Estancia, did y'all meet with the salesperson at Estancia?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah,
Who were
okay.
they? Yeah, you don't remember.
I remember the.
I don't either.
I dropped off the thank you cards. I can't remember the names. They sent it to me in an email. But yeah, so hopefully you got a chance to see kind of what that salesperson does and what their role is. Okay. So let's take a look at the service function and let's see if we can knock this out in 5 minutes. I think we can. I think a lot of this information is going to be very common for you guys, but if it's not, stop me, please. Why is service so important? Why is service important to you? Okay, Ruth?
It sets the tone for how your event's gonna go, how the person handling your event is going to treat you and your guests, not
Yeah.
only as your guests, but as their own guests. It can make or break a contract or a return.
Absolutely, definitely. I like that you focus on the return because we get somebody in, it's great if we want to have them return and have that repeat business. If we don't have that level of attention to detail in the service, then that could potentially affect and not only their return, but if they're a meeting planner, they're going to start talking to their friends, just like people talk on social media for just family vacations, but meeting planners talk as well. And so it's really important. Any other comments about service and why it's important? How many of you, be honest, how many of you would go back to a restaurant if the food was okay, but the service was stellar? I would.
Yeah,
If the
I prefer-
food
I
was
prefer that.
amazing and the service was subpar, even if the amazing food and you don't have a great experience in service, you're not gonna go back, right?
I'd go back and then every time I pray that those people will change.
There you go.
ask for
A diff-
another server.
Okay, cool.
I hold grudges and I'll take it out on the whole franchise, not even like the one location.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I did the same thing. There's one restaurant, they overcharged me. I talk about it in my cost control class. They charged me 25 cents to upgrade to a large drink, but I didn't ask for that. They just automatically added it. And then I asked for a refund. I looked around and everybody in the restaurant had a large drink. And I thought, how many people are not looking at their receipts, not paying attention, and this person's just adding 25 cents, right? Or like when you go through a drive-through, they're like, would you like a medium or large? Well, small is what's included.
Yeah.
So when you say medium, you're like, oh, of course I want medium because I don't want to pay an extra charge. But you are paying an extra charge because small is what's included in your meal and medium and large are both upgrades, right? So anyways, let's get off that soapbox. Your event services manager. They are the person who services the event. So they take whatever sales gives them and they make it happen. Okay. So that event services manager person, they are the ones who make things happen. And one thing that's happening lately is that hotels are bringing that person in maybe on the sales site visit. So that way they can hear it for themselves what is being told or what's good. And then that way also too, it tells that meeting planner, hey, this is Danielle. He's gonna be your convention services manager. So after we get done and we sign the contract, Danielle's gonna take over. So it makes them feel more comfortable that he's part of the process from the beginning, okay? Small meetings sometimes have more details or just as important attention to detail as it is for a large meeting. Large meetings just have more details to take care of. But small meetings still deserve that same level of attention to detail because you don't know if somebody in that small meeting could potentially come back for their family vacation. You don't know if that meeting could can turn into something that happens every month. There's hotels, isn't there, Ruth, don't you guys have like a military group that comes comes regularly?
Yeah, like once a month.
Yeah.
And they're there
Yeah.
for literally a whole month.
Yeah, and so that can lead to that type of level of business. okay? Convention services manager. We talked about most of these. I just got an invitation. I can't remember the exact. Oh, it's this one, Event Services Professional Association, ESPA. Michelle Moon with Visit San Antonio just emailed me that ESPA just had their convention last week. And she emailed me and she said, would you be willing to, or would you be interested in having a student organization of ESPA? VSA will pay for the membership. So of course I said yes. And so I don't know what that looks like. The ESPA person hasn't reached out to me yet because they just planned a conference. So as soon as I find out, like, I think that'd be really cool to have a student organization for events services professionals. And they have an annual conference. So really cool opportunity for us to see where that goes. But it's a way for us to recognize those CSMs, those convention services managers. It is not an easy job. Okay. People used to think, oh, David, you're always going to these parties. Well, no, I'm working parties. I'm the one who's planning and I'm the one who's overseeing to make sure it goes well. It's really high stress. Okay. Especially the social side because corporate, there's still a good attention to detail, but they're going to have their sales meeting every year. Social, they have that wedding maybe just once. I don't know. Maybe they're gonna have multiple weddings. I don't know. But that's their one wedding. That's their one birthday. That's their one whatever. And so those social events typically have a little bit more high stress.
Is that like the person? I know I went with you to last semester to the convention center.
Uh-huh.
The lady that gave us a tour, was that a convention?
Well, so she's an event manager, yes, for the convention services. But convention services doesn't necessarily mean it's at a convention center. It's just mean that that's the service manager for that event.
Okay.
Yeah, they call them convention services managers. But
Okay.
they don't, it doesn't have to be tied with the convention. It's just that's what they've got going on.
Okay.
Okay. So sometimes when we think about when we're going to transfer from sales, remember we book it, you cook it. Transfer times is during that site inspection. So when the meeting planner is actually here on site, we're actually going to do that transfer then, or we're going to introduce, okay? Once the contract is signed, or if this event is happening 2 years in advance, I may not bring in that convention services manager because it's not time to talk details. Their job is to talk about the details to make the event successful. And we can't do that unless it's like an event like Final Four. Holy cow, that's been going on for like 5-6 years. They've been planning that, right? But smaller meetings, things like that, you don't have to get them involved too far in advance.
Like the Olympics.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what it would be to do for those things. Okay. So as a CSM, and we're just a couple of minutes over, we want to review the file from sales to make sure I know all the details. Okay. We might have that letter of introduction. We're going to trace everything that's happening. We might have that interview between that we might facilitate that interview, or we might have that meeting with that CSM and the planner. Pre-con. Oops. Pre-con is pre-convention or pre-meeting. So we're gonna have monthly meetings to touch base. Hey, how's your room block coming? Oh my gosh, you're not gonna meet your room block. You need to get more of your registrants to book their hotel rooms, okay? And then during each function, that CSM is gonna be involved to make sure everything is correct. And then we have the post-convention meeting. Look at that. All right, so bring something to write with. We'll close the door so you can leave your major stuff here. I'm gonna bring my laptop so I can open up. Let me end the record.